Hey guys, today we're going to continue looking at the different passages that talk about the Christmas story. And I wanted just to ask this question. So Joseph took his very pregnant wife, as we're going to see from this story, and traveled around 80 miles with her being very, very pregnant. So join us as we look in this story today to examine, was Joseph just not a very smart man? So we had talked a little bit in our previous story about the fact that, in those days, being pregnant before marriage was a pretty huge deal. Now, we know just from looking at a map that Bethlehem was about 80 miles or so from Nazareth. And so, trying to think if there's anything else there that we need to look at. Here's our Bible story. And so Joseph took with him his betrothed wife who was pregnant. And the time came for her to give birth, and she gave birth to their firstborn son. And she wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger, because there was no room in the inn or the guest house. And there's our story from God's Word. So it says that he took with him Mary, his betrothed wife, who was pregnant. So, now I want you to think about how you picture that, right? There's a lot of songs and a lot of cartoons and a lot of Christmas specials that show Mary riding on a what? Yeah, on a donkey. We're going to see in a later story, after Jesus is born and they go to the temple to make the offering for Mary's cleansing, which was a good and proper thing to do for a Jewish girl, that they made the poor person's offering. Now, in those days, having a donkey, does that sound like something a poor person would be able to afford? To be able to travel on? Yeah. So more than likely, how did they probably make that trip? Walking. Now, we're not told whether the child came early or the child came late, but we do know she was very pregnant as they were making this journey. You may notice behind me, it's at our house we have our nativity table. Somebody counted, we have over a dozen nativity scenes in our house that just over the years collected from different places. It's always interesting to me that when you look in people's yards, most of those will have all the animals there. And usually there's a donkey involved someplace. I wonder, was Joseph did he just not know that it was difficult for a pregnant woman to travel? What might we learn about him from the fact he chose to take his wife? I wonder, could it have been that the people in Nazareth, when they saw Mary's pregnancy, they began to whisper among themselves, "Look at that, there she goes." Could it be possible that the social pressures were so great that Joseph chose to take her rather than leaving her there in that situation? Now, it says betrothed wife. Now, to you, what stands out to you about that? We're told in another passage that they did not have sexual relations until after the birth of Jesus. So, in a lot of people's minds, even though the betrothal was far more than our engagement today, but still it wasn't marriage, right? So what might it have been like for those neighbors around Mary to see her pregnant and not being married to Joseph? I mean, what would their thoughts probably have almost instantly have been? Yeah. I mean, how do you explain that your child? How do you explain to other people? I mean, I still can't imagine that conversation she had with Joseph, right? How do you explain to other people the child you're carrying is from God? It'd be kind of a hard sell, wouldn't it? Well, and it came time. You know, it's interesting to me. We looked at a story earlier in the fullness of time, and in this story just prior to this, that Caesar Augustus at a particular time he issued a decree, and now it came time for her to give birth. What might we learn about God that He is choosing to use time here as part of this whole process of bringing His Son onto the earth in human form? I mean, is God normally limited by things like time? But here we see Him choosing to use time. So, you see anything there that stands out to you? Now, it's interesting. There's some discussion. It says she gave birth, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, which is a traditional kind of way of still used today in many places of treating a child after they're born. But they're in a manger but because there wasn't any room in the inn or in the guest house, depending on which translation you choose there. And you might notice in the story, I kind of included both those because there's a little room there. Do you remember why Joseph was going back to Bethlehem? Yeah, because he was of the house and the line of David. So this is his hometown. I mean, this is a very relational society, right? I mean, it's, I even think I'm from Kentucky, and many of my family members are were more rural, and family and relationships very, very important. So, I mean, what might we learn about the fact that they didn't stay in somebody's house, a relative's house there? I mean, could that possibly tell us anything? Well, I mean, everybody has to go back. Everybody under the Roman rule has to go back to the places that they're from, to their hometowns, where their family is from. So, I mean, it could be that just families are overwhelmed with guests and visitors, right? But wait a minute. Mary's very pregnant. I mean, would it seem like a woman in her condition might have kind of been bumped up on the guest list to be given a nicer place to stay? What might we learn about people's view of her from the fact that those kind of resources were not offered her? A nicer place to stay wasn't offered. Yeah, I find it interesting in future stories, as we watch Christ, He really has a place in His heart for women who have been accused of things sexually or morally. Just wonder if some of that might come from this. I don't know. In this story, we see that Joseph's having to make some hard choices, but because of love. We kind of looked at the fact that he took her with him, even though she was very, very pregnant. I mean, what does that look like today? What kind of things do people do out of love that could be difficult? I mean, does that still happen? Yeah, I mean, what might that look like just in general in the world today? You know, we have worked with young people in our ministry over the years, and it has been amazing to us how many young people, they find that person that they believe God has for them, and right from the get go, that they have to choose between their spouse or their fiance and their family. That's a hard that's a hard decision. We have some people in our church that come from different religious backgrounds, and they've had to make choices between their family's faith and the faith they have found in Jesus. Uh, what what about you? Have you had to make some hard choices because of love? I'd love to see some of those in the comment section. Also, love to have you subscribe. I'm trying to bump up now to that next level. I think I've been stuck on 50 for a little bit. Don't worry, you're not going to get emails or appeals or anything. We're just doing this so that there's a number of stories available online for people to listen to. And this is not the model typically that we use in churches and with folks because it's very one-sided. But it does give you kind of an idea of how you can look at a story and kind of think through it a little bit. Well, this story is in Luke chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. And starting on Monday, we're going to begin looking at the story of the shepherds. And so until next time, keep on telling those Bible stories.